Story 1. Part of my work involves joining fragile items with very sticky double-sided tape. Sometimes the items and the tape are over 3 meters long, and the materials crease easily. The tape must be applied with precision because there is virtually no chance of recovery if either side is placed incorrectly. I am probably in the top 10% of people at this. Story 2. Reciting the digits of pi. I can recite only 100 digits, but many people probably do not know what pi is or only know 3.14, so I should probably be in the top 10%. Story 3. I used to be ranked number 1 in the world at Hungry Shark Evolution. Inevitably, you do not win anything and the game gets boring, so I lost my status. I can reclaim a top 10% rank within a week. Story 4. I was among the top 1/10 of 1% of people who successfully evaded capture during a major metropolitan manhunt. I was wrongly labeled a mass shooter in 2005 after someone opened fire nearby. I was at a window a few stories up, recording the police response with a camcorder, and officers broadcast over the radio that I was the shooter. The news picked up the story and it escalated into coverage that I was shooting people and filming the response. Police set up snipers and special weapons and tactics teams on rooftops, and they eventually raided my room after I had already left. I expected them to confiscate my video, which contained footage I wanted to sell to the nearby news station. I left with other evacuees and went to the station. The reporters were shocked. They said they could not use the footage and that the police were looking for me, and they advised me to turn myself in. Instead, I stayed at a friend's apartment for a few days until things cooled down, then returned home and uploaded the video to YouTube. Years later, after filing a police report when someone hit my car, I discovered that the police had found the video and were using it for training. I planned to re-upload the video. Story 5. My Spotify rap summary said I am among the top 1% of listeners for my favorite artist. Story 6. I am in the top 1% at changing light bulbs and painting ceilings. I am 6 feet 7 inches tall. Story 7. More than 99.9% of the global population lives south of me. It looks like more than 99.99%. Is everyone north of St. Petersburg north of me? What about the opposite? Where would that latitude be? Story 8. Not anymore. I used to be in the top 0.5% of ranked players in Magic, the Gathering in my state across multiple formats, and probably in the top 10% worldwide. I was limited by budget and my inability to travel, but I routinely played against Pro Tour level players. This was over a decade ago. Story 9. Strava January 2025 Cycling Elevation Challenge. The challenge has over 260,000 participants this month. I am in the top 50 worldwide. There are only a few days left, and I am tired. I need to ride several hours each day. If I skip a day, I could drop 100 places. I may end up riding more than 1,000 miles this month. I have finished in the top 100 before, but that mostly depended on getting lucky and not having to work nights or weekends. Story 10. Being in the top 10% is a low bar. If you pursue any hobby or skill somewhat seriously, you will likely rank there because most people do not have that specific ability. The top 1% is more noteworthy. Story 11. I would consider myself in the top 5% of those who slam themselves on thumbtacks after doing a sexy striptease. Story 12. If you make 15,000 United States dollars, you are in the top 10% of earners worldwide. Story 13. I am undoubtedly within the top 10% in the world at pouring 2 glasses of wine to the exact same level based purely on the sound of the pour. Story 14. I am certain I am in the top 1% for sleight of hand. I have practiced it as a hobby since childhood, and I even won an award last year. I am 6 feet 4 inches tall, colorblind, and left-handed. According to hastily searched statistics and calculations from the Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer model, approximately 320,000 people worldwide share all 3 traits, which is about 0.004% of the population. Looking only at Australian men, there are about 11 men in Australia who are over 6 feet 4 inches, colorblind, and left-handed. Therefore, I am almost completely confident that I am the best left-handed, colorblind Australian male magician over 6 feet 4 inches in the world. Story 15. When it comes to eating, I can consume a remarkably large amount of food. Story 16. Alcohol withdrawal. 2 seizure episodes occurred about 16 months apart. The first was severe. The second was much worse. I have been sober for over 3 years now. I have not met others in Alcoholics Anonymous who experienced similar seizures. Update. The official diagnosis was Wernicke encephalopathy. The incidence among people with alcohol use disorder is thought to be as high as 12.5%, so it may not be as uncommon as I thought. Story 17. Whistling, excluding whistling with fingers. I do not know how one would test it. Story 18. I once took a test, and the result was that I am better than 98% of people at pressing a button when 3 out of 5 triangles point upward. Story 19. I do portrait sketching. I am pretty sure that if I randomly selected 1,000 people from my area, I would rank in the top 10. So I would be among at least the top 5% globally. Story 20. Describing people in a way that makes you view household items differently. If I call you a dustpan of a person, you are filthy, collect dirt, and serve no greater purpose than leaning against a wall. Story 21. Trading. Only because 90% lose money and I do not, laughing out loud. I am not even that good at it. Story 22. It took me a while to respond, probably due to procrastination. Story 23. I am probably Korean. I only know a dozen words, but considering 99% of the world population knows 0 words, that puts me in the top 10%. Story 24. I played Division I college football. Only 1% of high school athletes reach that level. Story 25. Not drinking alcohol 1 day at a time for 38 years might get me there. I am not sure, because perhaps 25% of the world population never drinks or cannot afford it. Otherwise, I would have to say socks. I own hundreds of them. Story 26. This is really cheesy, but I am stoned right now and it is the first thing I thought of. I am in the top 10% for loving my fiancé. I love that guy. Story 27. There was an old Xbox Live Arcade game called Outrun Online Arcade, which was a remake of Outrun. I had the #1 leaderboard times for every race for a while. I absolutely adored that game. Story 28. Foreigners speaking Thai, 60 or more common business-oriented language programmers, and people driving a Chinese car that most people think is English. Story 29. Weightlifting. I'm by no means amazing, but a 100-kilogram bench press, a 150-kilogram squat, and a 170-kilogram deadlift at under 90 kilograms body weight is pretty good, almost a deadlift of twice my body weight, and better than what the majority of people can do. If I addressed excess weight, I could probably get down to 75 kilograms body weight, which would make those lifts very impressive. The rarest for many to replicate would be my 70-kilogram squat snatch. Again, not amazing, but fewer than 10% of people have even tried a snatch, let alone with a significant weight like that. To put it in perspective, most people struggle with an empty polyvinyl chloride pipe the first time they try. Story 30. Ability to use my feet and toes, moving my little toes completely independently of the other toes. Story 31. World of Warcraft Demonology Warlock. Whenever I return to the game, I typically rank around the 96th percentile. To be honest, when fewer people were playing, I was number 3 in the world in Mythic Plus score, which is the player versus environment mode. Story 32. I benched 160 kilograms in a powerlifting competition, which places me in the top 10% overall and in the top 10% of the weight class above mine. Story 33. I have probably done every niche thing since most people will never have tried them. I am number 1 at humming and whistling while holding a pretend Star Trek phaser. Story 34. Statistics. Playing guitar, playing piano, running, history, useless knowledge, chess, income. Story 35. I am resilient and mentally strong. I am sure of it. Life made things so hard that I became a diamond. Story 36. I always look young. People think I am 29 or 30, but I am 41. My hair is still black. My father is also in the top 5%. Story 37. I have a large eating capacity. I learned at a young age that my stomach expands more than the average person's. It is not enough to make me a competitive eater, though. Story 38. I can speak 5 languages fluently and 2 more at an intermediate level. Story 39. Top 2% in a first-person shooter game. I used to be 98th in the world rankings, but there are too many cheaters and aim assist abusers, so I do not care anymore. I am also a 1% Spotify user. It is very hard to be silent. Story 40. If I told you, you could find where I work. There is one thing I do that no one else in the world does. It is a fun thing to mention at parties but not on the internet, laughing out loud. Story 41. Bench press. A 100-kilogram bench press puts you in the top 1% in the world, and it is achievable. Annoyingly, I am not even top 3 in my family. Story 42. This week I walked roughly 10 to 20,000 steps a day. My Samsung Health application told me I was in the top 10 to 20% for my age range in average daily steps. I would say that is nice. Story 43. I was mentored by a beekeeper who was ranked number 1 in the world for honey quality years ago. I managed to become number 1 in my county and number 6 in my state as a beginner beekeeper. Making fine quality honey is extremely difficult, like making fine wine. There are many variables. I could not reach that highest honor because I had to give up my small farm. I do miss the bees. Story 44. To be honest, I am among the 1% of the most stupid and dense people in the world. Story 45. I collect baseball cards of a certain lesser-known player, which makes it easy to acquire rare cards at reasonable prices. I have spent the last few years assembling his serial numbered cards, and I believe my collection is among the most comprehensive in the world. Story 46. I used to be a top-ranked player in World of Warcraft on the United States Daggerspine server as an elemental shaman before elemental shamans were even meta. Unrelatedly, I have voluntarily generated piloerection. I believe few people can get goosebumps on command, and I can do it at any time. Story 47. I am undecided. I will let you know if I change my mind. Story 48. Most people think they are above average drivers, but I spent 15 years driving a 40-foot bus, and 2 of those years were spent doing charter work in New York City. I am in the top 10% of drivers on the road. Story 49. My maximum bench press is 445 pounds. Statistically, I am likely in the top 1%. Story 50. Running lifetime personal records are 22.9 seconds for 200 meters, 49.8 seconds for 400 meters, 1 minute 55 seconds for 800 meters, 4 minutes 15 seconds for the mile, 14 minutes 55 seconds for 5 kilometers, and 57 minutes 45 seconds for 10 miles. Story 51. I can move each eyebrow separately. Most people I know cannot do that. Story 52. Even if you take a single judo practice session, you are automatically in the 1% of the population. To emphasize the point, I am terrible at it. Story 53. Living without sleep. I have been a lifelong night owl and insomniac, and I have had little sleep throughout my 44 years. I could go several days with little to no sleep and experienced only mild tiredness. When I was a child, I thought that was how everyone was and was upset that I had to stay quiet in my room all night. Now I have learned it is extremely rare for a person to function without sleep. Story 54. I smoke weed and make it a competition. It is so gross. Story 55. Golf short game. Not because I am anything particularly special, it is just that most people are god-awful at chipping and putting. Story 56. I am in the top 10 if by top you mean having no assets. Story 57. I am almost certain I rank in the top 10% of any of the Tony Hawk games. Story 58. I do not watch sports or read books. I am really good at not doing either of those, laughing out loud. Story 59. Sadly, a significant portion of the world's population is illiterate. Reading is a huge part of my life, and even within my educated, well-read community, people often comment on what I have been reading and start conversations about recommendations. Story 60. Wealth. I have $72.46 in my checking account. That puts me in the top 10%, right? Story 61. I have memorized the periodic table of elements. I can sort them by name, symbol, or group. Story 62. I dive using a self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Roughly 1% of people in the world have ever done this, and far fewer do it regularly. Story 63. Computers are easy. Most of the world barely knows how to open a web page. Story 64. I have won a lot of money at poker since my early 20s. 90% of poker players lose money overall, and I can confidently say I have done very well. I hardly played at all last year, yet I won $12,000 and finished in the money in 2 of the 4 World Series of poker tournaments I entered. Lately, I have been playing $1, $3 no-limit Texas Hold'em, and I have been uninvited from more than one home game because I usually beat players who are less skilled. Luck and variance are factors in poker, but skilled players still win in the long run. Story 65. I am number 1 at doing push-ups in my house. No one here has ever done more than I have. Story 66. Duolingo German from English. I am in the top 0.1% of all Duolingo learners. Story 67. I have always been a fast reader. I was never trained as a speed reader, but a coworker recently asked how many words per minute I read. I did not know, so I took a couple of online tests and used my Kindle read time estimates. It came out to about 400 to 450 words per minute, which is in the top 10%. I use it for fantasy and romance novels, the smuttier the better. Story 68. I am a very mediocre guitarist, but I am probably still better than 90% of humanity. Story 69. Oh, I bet I am in the top 10% at accidentally getting tape stuck to itself in a way that ruins the strip of tape I am using. Story 70. Wealth. I am not rich by American standards, but anyone making more than about 25,000 United States dollars per year is in the top 10% globally. Story 71. I am in the 0.1% of Guitar Hero and Rock Band players. My best friend and I cracked the top 20 a handful of times as a duo. Story 72. I am 68 years old and have 2 degrees in philosophy, which I obtained in the past for the love of the subject. I still enjoy taking classes about human nature and the cosmos, and I would venture that I am among the top 10% of people seeking to understand these topics. Story 73. The work I do is so specialized that the worldwide group of professionals who use this technology are on a first-name basis. Story 74. Plugging a universal serial bus cable in the wrong way the first time. Story 75. Call center customer service skills. I bet fewer than 10% of people have them, and I'm very good at them. Story 76. Years ago, I was oddly obsessed with Angry Birds. I replayed levels at least a dozen times. One day, I noticed in the App Store leaderboard that I was in position 13,432 out of millions of users. I was in the top 1%. Story 77. I have a solid understanding of a wide range of topics, from geopolitics and geography to public speaking, information technology, sports, and more. While I am not an expert in any single area, my knowledge is broad enough to hold meaningful conversations with people about their favorite subjects. Story 78. Give me a random English word and I can identify or correctly guess which language it comes from. I am definitely not 100% accurate, but I am probably better than 90% of people. Story 79. Previously, it would have been rock climbing. At one point, I was the number 1 under 18 climber in my country. I competed in an open category event at 17 and tied for 3rd place. I stopped climbing to focus on studying, but people I used to compete against went on to set the most challenging routes in the country. Story 80. After consulting the generative pre-trained transformer, I examined income level, education level, number of languages spoken, and the age when I had my first child. The world is not fair. You do not have to be wealthy to be among the top 10% in income. Story 81. I speak English. I am one of about 400 million native speakers, which is about 5% of the global population of 8 billion. Mandarin Chinese is the only language spoken natively by more than 10% of the global population. With about 900 million native speakers, it accounts for approximately 11 to 12%. Story 82. Playing Uno. I created a league years ago. However, I have never won a season. You said top 10%, not top 1%. Story 83. Probably programming or software engineering. but that is still a bold claim I cannot prove. Rationale. My background is the following. I have a Master of Science in Statistics from a highly ranked university in the United States of America, and I worked as a data scientist and then as a machine learning engineer in Silicon Valley. I have many thousands of hours of programming experience across a variety of environments. I built the first machine learning models for billion-dollar companies. Now I am out of the game for complicated reasons. I could probably win a competition in some niche subfield of that work, such as writing structured query language on the fly. Story 84. I would say I am in the top 10% in the United States at Beat Saber. Story 85. I rap and believe I am better than most, but I am not sure I am in the top 10%. It is a subjective matter. It is the only skill I am confident I could be more proficient at than most people. If we are talking about the ability to rhyme with rhythm while delivering a coherent verse, I am confident I would be in the top 10% by vote. However, my vocal delivery is not as strong as many people, so I am probably around the top 50% when it comes to performing it. Story 86. Based on statistical websites, I'm currently in the top 0.8%. I am Diamond 2 with 42 league points on the Europe West server. I am also left-handed, which only about 10% of people are. I'd argue that makes me special. League of Legends probably makes me special in bad ways. Story 87. Pretty much everyone who is not a native English, Chinese, or Hindi speaker is in the top 10% at speaking their own language. Story 88. Spotify said I am in the top 0.05% of Ed Sheeran listeners. Story 89. When I played Tetris on Tetrio, I reached a high rank that placed me among the top 5% of players, but I was still much worse than the very best. Story 90. Being in the top 10% is easy. For example, I am in the top 10% in a particular trading card game, but that is because it is rather niche and few people worldwide know about it. Story 91. I am in the top 0.0001% when it comes to not gossiping or letting myself get drawn into any drama. I honestly could not care less. Story 92. I consumed a wide variety of A-rated Newgrounds content. Until 2018, I had watched every video and played every game. Story 93. I am really good at math, except that I do not know what 10% is. Story 94. I am at work and actually doing something. I am a security officer. Apart from making visitor badges and giving directions, I do little else but watch YouTube and Netflix and play games on my Steam Deck. Story 95. Disturbed sleep. I cannot remember the last night I slept for longer than 20 minutes without waking because my joints pinch me. Story 96. Golf. Statistically, I am in the top 1.5% based on how golfer skill levels are tracked using a handicapping system that puts me at a plus 2.4 handicap. Story 97. Considering that I am upper middle class in one of the wealthier developed countries, my income is most likely higher than average. Story 98. Chess. 1600 rating on chess.com in blitz and rapid formats. League of Legends peak rank Platinum 2. Dota 2. Peak matchmaking rating 4500. Story 99. Given that most people in the world have access to video games, I can confidently say I am in the top 10% of all Mario Kart players. Story 100. I play no-hit characters in bullet hell games. Probably The Binding of Isaac, Nuclear Throne, and Enter the Gungeon. Story 101. When I was younger, I would have said arm wrestling. I used to arm wrestle anyone and beat several men weighing more than 400 pounds, and my friends won a lot of money. Nowadays, I would say foosball because it is a small community and few people can play at the tournament level. Story 102. I can operate this machine. Story 103. I played a lot of pool in my 20s. So much so that I had a world ranking for a few years. Not enough that anyone would have heard of me, but I did play in county and national championships. I would not have a hope in hell of qualifying these days. I almost never play anymore, but that was enough, I suppose, to be in the top 10% this thread asked for and then some. Story 104. Living with knowledge of the White Heather Club, an old British Broadcasting Corporation show. Story 105. I thought that being autistic and in full-time employment might be in the top 10%, but current research for my country shows about 11%, so not quite. The rate is shockingly low and varies by country. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics data from 2022, among autistic individuals aged 15 to 64 years, 11.4% were employed full-time and 29.8% were employed part-time. The unemployment rate for autistic individuals was reported at 18.2%, more than double the rate for people with disabilities, 7.5%, and almost 6 times the rate for those without disabilities, 3.1%. Story 106. I was in the top 1% of listeners for all 5 of my top artists on Spotify for 2024. Story 107. I have shotgunned beers and had countless Britons, Australians, and New Zealanders tell me they could drink me under the table, only for them to crumble before my superior drinking ability. Story 108. I'm 99% sure I'm in the world's top 10% of overthinkers, but I'm not sure how one might measure that. Story 109. I am a World of Tanks player. Statistically, almost no one plays it anymore. At its peak, there were about 100 million players worldwide. Of those, I am in the top 25%. Story 110. I do not think many people can play both the flute and the oboe. Even if I am not particularly good at them, I am still in the top 10%. Story 111. Worldwide, education and income matter most. Most people would be shocked to find themselves in that income bracket. The most jarring differences are between the top 1% and the rest of the top 5%, and between the top 5% and the top 10%. That is when income differences become morally revolting and simply atrocious. Story 112. I was ranked 86th in the world on the escalation leaderboard in Transformers War for Cybertron out of thousands of players. Story 113. Boring answer. My job. I am a full-stack web developer. It is a common role among programmers, and I am far from the best in that group. However, most people in the world are not programmers. Story 114. I have been playing golf for a long time, so I would assume it helps. I am also a very fast reader, so that might help as well. Story 115. I would say traveling. I have been to 22 countries and more than half of the states in the United States. There are certainly people who have been to more, but billions have never left their country or have visited only 2 to 5. 10% sounds right. Story 116. I am comfortably in the top 10% for my marathon time and would say I am closer to the top 1%. Story 117. I like to think I am in the top 10% of miniature painters. I hope I am actually in the top 1%. Story 118. A couple of years ago, I was in the top 100 worldwide for the 400-meter sprint in my age group, men aged 35 to 39 years. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.